Hi friends, welcome back to another watercolor subscription box tutorial. I'm Emma Lefebvre, and today we are diving into our September box, and I have to say this is probably one of my favorites. So let's open up our September box, get to know our supplies, and dive right into this painting. Okay friends, today we are on to September's watercolor subscription box. I'm really happy with this one. This is definitely one of my favorites. It is a bit more detailed. It may look a bit more difficult, but it's not. It just takes a little bit of time and it's so fun. So let's dive in and see what we got this month. Okay, so I will say as I'm unboxing this, I wasn't sent brand new paints and brushes. So these are ones that I've already used before, so just bear with me. But you should see the card, obviously, that's how you got to this tutorial. This is what we are painting. This month's free gift is vegan brush soap. I've never actually used brush soap before, but it may actually be a great idea to help prevent staining on your brush. So I'm going to show you how to use this in just a minute. Our brushes for this month are a size 12 round and a size 2 cat's tongue. And like I said, these are my used paints, but the paints that we have today are yellow ochre, leaf green, I believe this is cobalt blue hue, and scarlet lake. Really fun colors to work with. Then you should have your paper and your tracing template. If you don't want to trace it, you don't have to. You can try and draw it on your own, but I just created this just so you have something to trace, just so it will be a little bit easier to help you along. Okay, so now that we've seen what's in the box, let's get to know our supplies. So take one of your pieces of paper, or if you have another piece of scrap paper, you can cut it in half, and we're gonna swatch our colors and get to know our brushes a little bit better. Okay, so I've got my palette here. I know the colors are probably killing people that it's not in order of color. I still have them in order by month just because I'm working through it, and I plan that at the end of the year I will arrange them by color. If you want to do that sooner than later, please feel free to go ahead. I know this probably annoys so many people that I have them all out of order, but to me they are by month because I only work with them for the boxes as right now. So that's how I have them organized. Put your new paints in your palette. I just cleaned it so we can do some new mixes, and let's start by mixing. So my size 12 round in this box set is the same that's in my smaller brush set by Craftimo. This is the only duplicate that is in the box set and my regular 4-piece set from Craftimo. And the reason why I did that is because I find that I use my size 12 the most out of any other brush. So I thought, what's the harm in having one more? I absolutely love it, so that's why I included it. So I'm going to use this for mixing my colors. It's just so nice and juicy to use. So I just rinsed that kind of glue that's off the bristles to keep them straight during transit. Dabbed it on my paper towel. Now I'm just going to take my spray bottle. I'm just going to wet up the colors. And let's just start by swatching each individual color. So we have yellow ochre, and then this bright, bright leaf green, which is actually super fun, cobalt blue, and scarlet red. Okay. So let's start by mixing different colors. Actually, should I use my smaller brush? No, we'll use this one. Okay. So I'm going to start by taking my yellow ochre and just putting it in 3 different areas on my palette to mix. This is just how I do it. Feel free to do it however you'd like to do it. And then I will start mixing the other individual colors with them. So if we mix leaf green with this yellow ochre, you're going to get this really bright kind of greeny, yellowy color, which is fun. Just gives you another range of yellow. You can make it more on the green side by adding more green to it. Just kind of brightens it up a bit. Or you can add more yellow ochre, and it'll just be slightly different. Not too huge of a range there. Okay, and then we have our cobalt blue mixture with it, which if you think a yellow and a blue, you'll get green. But because this yellow ochre is a bit more muted, we should get more of like a neutrally kind of green. So let's see what we get here. Okay, that's too much blue, but this is more on the blue side. You can get a nice dusty kind of blue, which we actually kind of use for the berries in our painting. Let's add more yellow than blue. And you do get a green-ish kind of color. It's more of like a, I don't know, it's kind of like a browny green. It's like a, not sage. I'm trying to think of the word. Kind of olivey. It's interesting though. Now you can mix it a bit more half and half. That's more of like a eucalyptus-y kind of green. But they're subtle, but really nice. Okay. And then with our red, you should get kind of like this burnt orange color. Okay. If you want to lighten up your red, you can just mix it with the yellow ochre. Okay. Now let's mix some with the blues. Our remaining colors with the blues. Okay, so let's start with the leafy green because that is going to be kind of like our green color for this painting. So I'm just taking a bit of my green and adding the blue to it. Just makes it like a darker green. Okay, and you can add more blue and it makes it a bit darker. Okay, let's add even more blue and then it makes it a bit more turquoise. Then you can also add a tad bit of red. And that will kind of neutralize it. It needs a bit more of the colors. Hold on. Yes, I contaminate my paint colors. Can make it a bit more olivey. Okay. I'm gonna go back to our bluey green here. Let's add some yellow to it instead. The yellow ochre. Kind of like a light olive. Like that. And then our last combination is the red and blue. So this one has a bit more red to it, so it's a bit more of like a pinky purple. You can add even more red. With that tint of blue, it just makes it a bit more like of a cherry red. See that? Or like a maroon. And then if we go more blue with just a bit of red, we should get that color that's kind of used for the berries, this darker purple, which is really nice. I think I use this for the berries. Just trying to get that right combination there. Love this color. So the blue with a little bit of the red, or you can go with a little bit of the red. Okay. And there we go. Okay. So there's our range of colors. There's so many colors in this palette. This was a really fun to use to mix. It was actually quite easy just because you have kind of the primary colors. There are yellow or some sort of yellow, a blue, and a red. So it made it really easy to find colors to mix together. But it's just a lot of fun to use. So that's our mixing colors. As for our brushes, how to use them, I feel like most of us are very familiar with a round brush. It's probably one of the most versatile brushes, especially a nice thick one like this. It has a beautiful point where you can create these really, really thin lines with just a little bit of pressure. But then if you use heavier pressure, you can get these really thick strokes. And you can go from thin to thick, from thin to thick. Okay, and if you're not as familiar, you can just practice strokes. You can do C curves, like that, little squiggles. Just practicing the different pressure strokes, okay? But I feel like a round brush is pretty straightforward. Then we have our cat's tongue brush, and this is actually really great for detail because of how tiny it actually is, and it has a really great point. So if you want to grab your cat's tongue brush, and you can just play with it a little, see how thin you can make your strokes. how thick you can make them if you leave it kind of flat. You can do the thick to thin, same kind of thing, light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure. And this is really great for leaves if you want to try like a little stem, and then do light pressure, heavy pressure. Okay, and you can just do your light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure, and you create these like perfect little sprig of leaves, which we're actually going to be using in this painting. So if you want to practice that, just do a really light, tiny little stem with this brush, and then heavy pressure, and then back up to light pressure to give it a point. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's really great for this. This brush is actually perfect for tiny little leaves and foliage, which I love. And then you can use it for the little berries as well. It's just a really fun brush to do leaves and little details. So again, just play around, play with it on the flat side. So just kind of dragging it like that. You can turn it on its side so it's a little bit thinner and see the strokes you get there. And you're just going to play for a little bit, get familiar with the brush. But for this painting, you don't need to know too many specific strokes because we're mostly focusing with shadows and shapes. It's not as loose of a project, so you don't need to feel like you got that loose technique down. We're just gonna have a lot of fun working on this. All right, so now that we have gotten to know our supplies a little bit better, let's trace our image onto our paper and begin. Okay, so let's trace our image. Get out your tracing paper and a sheet of your regular paper that you're going to do the painting on and the template. Start by taking the tracing paper and place it over the template. Then you're going to take a black pen or anything you really have. You can use a pencil if you want. I like to use my black pen, and I will outline the entire image. So once you finish the outline on your tracing paper, you're gonna flip the tracing paper over so you have the back of the tracing paper, and you're gonna take a pencil and you are just gonna scribble some graphite all over the traced image. So I'm just doing it over the lines, and I'm just making sure I'm laying down enough of that graphite to the back side. Then once you're done scribbling all over those outlines, you're going to flip the tracing paper back over onto your watercolor paper. Make sure it's nice and even of where you'd like it placed. And then you're just going to take your pencil and you're going to go over the outline again. Now the reason why I use my ink first and then I use a pencil to outline it is because then I can kind of see where I've already outlined. I can just see that there's like a shine from the pencil of where I've already outlined over the ink, if that makes sense. And then you can always check underneath just to make sure it's transferring well, but it should be pretty good and work really well. Okay, so now that we have got our outline, let's start painting. So I'm going to start by taking my size 12, and we're going to start with the mushroom, the top of the mushroom, just because it's one of the most fun parts, and that's what I want to do. So as you can see on the painting, there's some white spots on it. So if you want to, you could always use like white acrylic paint over top. But what I did is I actually just did these little kind of circles like this, and then I painted around them. So make sure you leave enough space. And I'm just taking like a medium wash of the red, and I'm just doing that. So we're just going to do these little kind of lumpy circles kind of randomly, and we don't want our paper to dry, so I have a fair amount of paint and water on my brush as I'm doing this. Usually you don't want it to pool kind of the way it is pooling right now, but it just helps keep it wet longer so you're not left with these weird drying marks around certain areas, like when you make your way over to the next side of the mushroom. It just helps to have a bit more paint and a little bit more water on your brush as you do this. Okay, and they don't have to be exactly like the picture. You can just place them randomly, do as many or as little as you like. Just move your way over. And if it feels better to do it with the smaller brush, you can. The reason why I'm using my size 12 is because I'm able to cover more surface area. Then it gives it a little less of a time to dry fast. If I was working with a smaller brush, it might dry a little too quickly because you can't cover as much area with a smaller brush. So that's why I'm using this size 12. You just got to use light pressure to get these little spaces. Okay. Okay, and then while it's still wet, we're going to take some more red. Actually, no, first I'm going to wash off my brush and I'm going to dry it just a little bit on my paper towel, and I'm just going to lift some of that color from the top. So it's just a lighter red. Wipe it on my brush, and it kind of also lifts some of that pooling paint, but it also makes it lighter towards the top. Then I'm going to grab more of our red here, little tiny bit of our blue just to make it a little bit darker, and I'm just going to start tapping this darker red to the base because it should still be wet. Okay, so it should be able to blend nicely. Just trying to get more paint on my brush here. A little bit of blue just to make it a darker red. And I'm just kind of tapping this dark red, and it should blend in fairly easily if it's still wet. Now, if you find that it's pooling a lot and there's quite a huge difference between the wetness below and the top of the mushroom, and they start separating, that might mean you have too much water and paint on your paper down here. Okay. And if you do get some of those blooms, it's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's nature. Mushrooms don't have to be perfect. But if you're wondering why that's happening, I'm just taking my medium red, just plain red, just kind of working its way up here. That's why that happens. So if you're finding that the darker red that we mixed is pooling a lot down here, and then I can already see right here, can you see that? Where I lightened the paper up and I took off some of that wet paint, that's going to dry at a different rate than what I just laid down. So it's going to separate a bit. So in order to fix that, I'm going to wash off my brush, just dry it just a little bit, and I'm just going to kind of blend these two areas together. You're kind of re-wetting the top here so it is the same amount of wetness as what we just laid down. And that should do it. Okay? And if you want to add a bit more darkness, just add a little bit more blue to your red. And just place it at the bottom of that mushroom. Just tapping it. We can also deepen these shadows later as well. Okay? Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing to the other mushrooms. Okay, so let's do this one down here. Now, the difference with the mushrooms down below is that the mushroom up top is going to be casting a shadow on these ones underneath. So once we add in the shading and the shadows, it's going to be darker than the one up here. So I'm just kind of creating my circles. I have a decent amount of paint on here. It's kind of pooling, just so it's easy to spread around. Okay, we can always lift some of that pooling water. But if I use a bit more water and paint for this part, there's less of a chance that it will dry while I'm adding these circles. Okay, so it's quite wet. There's quite a lot of pooling. Now I'm going to wash off my brush, dry it on my paper towel, and I'm just going to start lifting up some of that color and that water. And that just kind of takes away the pooling just a bit. Not a lot. You don't want to lift up a lot of it, but just the excess pooling. Okay, now we're going to mix my dark red. I'm going to get lots of red here. A little bit of blue to get this dark red color. And for this one, I'm putting a lot more of the shadow where it would hit the mushroom right underneath that taller one. Okay, so I'm just tapping it in mostly on this side because that's where there would be a shadow. Okay. Then I'm going to wash off my brush a bit, dry it again. I always dry off my brush so I'm not taking up too much paint. I'm just going to take just plain red and then just try and kind of blend this dark to light situation here. Like that, so it's darker on that side. And then lastly, wash and dry off again, and I'm just going to kind of lift just a bit on this side, just so it looks like it's a little bit lighter. Okay, and there we go. And then let's do the last one over here. Starting with just my red, a little bit more water and paint. Now, I don't know a lot about mushrooms, but these ones are always my favorite to paint. I think they're poisonous. But they're so pretty in like fall photos. In real life, like actual photos of them, they're kind of gross. I have, what's it called? Trypophobia, where I have like a fear of holes. But it also like applies to bumps. Like when there's like lots of like lumps and bumps clustered together, it really bothers me and like grosses me out. And this is one of those things. So the wrong kind of photo of a mushroom that I come across can really make me like, bleh. But I don't know. This one is just so pretty to paint. Okay, so now grab our dark red. And again, we're just going to tap in where it would be casting that shadow. So leave just a little bit of lighter red on this side. Okay, this one's mostly covered like that. Okay, and then we're going to let those completely dry before we move on to the rest of the mushrooms. But while we're waiting, we could do maybe some of like the acorn down here. I like to leave the leaves and stuff for last just because it's fun to do all together. But yeah, let's do some of the other stuff. So the acorn is brown, so I'm going to grab some yellow ochre here. And I'm going to mix a little bit of this red that we have, like that. This dark red, it had a tint of blue, and that's kind of perfect for the bottom of it. I'm just going to lay it down there. So we have this light brown, like that. I'm going to take off some of that color and pigment. I'm just going to leave a lighter area on it. We can do some shading. Let's create our dark brown. So I'm going to grab some red, and I'm going to grab some blue, and then I'm going to grab some of the yellow ochre. The blue is what's going to make it darker, so maybe a bit more blue, and the red makes it a little bit warmer. Okay, and I'm just going to add just a little bit of darkness to the bottom side there. And then I actually want to leave the top of the acorn for it to just be a bit separated. So we're not going to do that. I don't want it to bleed into there. But let's make our dark brown. Let's make it even darker for when we need it later. So it's blue, red. Let's see if we add the green, what that does. Yeah, that makes it too greeny. Needs more red. And then more blue. There we go. There's like a dark brown. Can even just take a little bit and add it to the bottom of the acorn there. Okay. And then we can do maybe the leaf, and then there's like this tiny little ladybug. So I'm going to take my smaller brush for this. And I'm just going to grab some red. I'm just going to do the body of the ladybug here. We can only do little things at a time. When you're working on a piece that's like this, where you don't have a lot of color bleeds and stuff, there's a lot of waiting and drying time. So we're going to leave that before we add the black. And then the color of this leaf, I did kind of like this burgundy purpley color. So again, red, blue. It's like a purpley color. I think it needs a bit more red. And then a little tiny bit of orange in there. Or not orange, yellow. It's like this, I want a little bit more red, a little bit more blue. It's like this purpley kind of color. So I'm just going to start by doing the outline kind of. And it has like these jagged edges. I'm going to add a bunch of water. Just kind of fill it in. And then we can just drop in some more darker color. Just kind of tap it in. One thing I love about fall leaves is that they're just so, like I love when they start changing and you get these little hints of different colors. Like you can drop in a little bit of the yellow ochre in there if you want. A little bit more of just like an orange or a red. Like it's just starting to change. Like so. Okay, so let's let this all dry and then we will come right back. Okay, so now that our paper is dry, we can move on to the base of the mushroom. So let's mix our colors here. So we have this dark brown that we did. Let's make that light brown again. So let's get our yellow ochre, some red. You know what? I should probably be mixing it in these wells. I feel like it will be a bit easier. Red, yellow, bit of blue, like so. Maybe a bit more blue just to make it, there we go. And then I'm just going to take off some of that pigment in my water because I want it to be fairly light to start. So I'm just going to start by filling in the base of the mushroom here. I'm going to leave that inner part and we'll do that after. Okay, I'm just going to fill in the whole base, going around any kind of like little blades of grass. Like that. Around our little ladybug. Okay, and then I'm going to take that darker brown that we had and I'm going to start tapping it. Oops, that was a lot. Tapping it towards the top. Now, if it's pooling a lot like I just did, that's going to dry again at a different rate and it's going to give you some of that separation, those blooms that you may not like. So I'm just going to lift up some of that color. Like that. Grab a little bit more darkness, not as much water this time. I'm going to tap in that darker color towards the top because that's where there would be more of a shadow. Okay. There'd be a bit of a shadow here. This little one is kind of creating a bit of a shadow on the side here. Same over here, just tapping it under there. And then the separation of the base of the mushroom is going to have a bit of a shadow here. I'm just going to start by just creating a little bit of a one. And then once it dries, we can do a sharper shadow. And I'm going to just create a little bit more shadow down here. Like that. Okay. And then I see a little bit of separation. So I'm just going to try and wet up the whole area just so it doesn't separate too crazily. Okay. Then we're going to do the same thing to the other ones. So let's... Now, one thing with this cobalt blue hue, it actually is a bit of a granulating, kind of separating kind of paint. So if you see when you mix the two colors together, I don't know if you can see this, but you can see a little bit more of the blue in the acorn. The paint, just because of the color that it is, I find that happens a lot with cobalts and the ultramarine. They tend to separate a little bit more and be a little bit more granulating, but I think it kind of adds a little bit of texture and just kind of life to this painting. So don't think that there's any kind of fault with the paint. It's just the type of paint it is. I feel like most ultramarines and like cobalt blues are granulating paints. Okay, so I'm just adding a little bit more shadow. Might add a bit more up there too. Just a tad bit, like that. Maybe a little bit down here. Okay, so I'm seeing a little bit of separation on this one, but that's okay because it's a mushroom. It doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, and we're going to be doing some more shadows and stuff over top of it anyway, so I'm not too worried. And then lastly, the one over here. With our light brown color. I might try and make this all a little bit more blended down here. There we go. Okay. Just making sure it's all the same amount of wetness here. Moving that color around. And then grabbing our dark brown, tapping it towards the underneath top part there, maybe a little bit here. Okay. And then we're going to let those dry. Okay, so now I'm going to do some of the other areas. I'm just going to grab my yellow ochre again, a little bit of the red, a little bit of the blue to tone it down. And then I'm just going to kind of take some of that pigment off, and I'm going to do the light part underneath. So I'm just going to fill in this, make it lighter than the stem of the mushroom. Okay. Because you kind of want that stem to stand out a bit more. And then do the other little one down here, the underneath. Again, making it lighter. Like that. Okay, and then we're going to leave those. Okay, so let's do the dark part on this acorn. So we're making our dark brown again because I kind of ran out. So our yellow ochre, our red, and our blue, but more blue, right? A bit more red. It's a little bit too purpley. A little bit more yellow. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to start with a medium wash. I'm going to go over the top here, like that. Then I'm going to grab more of the color just so it's a little bit darker, and just make it a little bit darker around the side here. There, and then do a little stem, okay? Now we can do the grass below. So it depends on whether you want to use your smaller brush or your bigger brush. It's totally up to you. I think I might grab my bigger brush. I do have okay control with it. So I'm going to grab some of my leaf green and my blue, like that. And I'm going to start with this kind of medium green, and I'm just going to, you don't have to go exactly around the edges that I did for the grass. You can kind of make it your own. But I probably will switch my brush. Will I? Will I not? To do some of these blades of grass. Will I? I can do it with this bigger brush. But if it feels more comfortable to do it with like a detailed brush, feel free. And we are going to darken up this grass a bit because it is a bit too bright, in my opinion. Go around this little ladybug. You can go over some of the mushrooms a little bit more, like it doesn't have to be perfectly in the white space. Create a couple more blades of grass if you like. Okay. Now I want to darken up this blue and make it a bit more neutralized. So I'm going to grab more blue and a bit of red to make it a little bit brown. And I'm just going to kind of tap in because it should still be wet. Tap in around the sides, maybe underneath this leaf, around the edges. Okay, you do want to leave some of that lighter bit, but you also want to have some of this darker, and you can even do like tiny little strokes for better grass if you'd like. Okay, I do want to leave some of that lighter grass as well. We can make it even a little bit darker. Okay, like so. And there is our grass. Okay, so before we do the detail on the mushrooms, let's let this grass dry, and then we're gonna do the foliage around the side, and then we'll finish off with extra details. So let your grass dry, and we'll be right back. Okay, so now that it's dry, we can move on to the foliage. Fun story, if this painting looks a little bit different, it is. I don't know if you guys remember from, I think it was the June box when this happened to me. I had finished the whole painting and filming it, and my camera stopped recording. So that's where I am at this point. So I had to redo this again, and I'm reshooting it for the second time. So that's why it may look a little different than my first one. But either way, let's just keep going. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to the foliage, like I said. For this, I'm gonna take my small size 2 brush, and I'm just gonna create some brown again. So I'm gonna grab my blue, grab some red, a bit more red, and then some of the yellow ochre to make our brown. It's a pretty good brown, and I'm just gonna go around our little semicircle, and it doesn't have to be perfectly straight or round or anything. You can do like little twigs kind of coming off it if you want, but you just want the general shape. And we're just gonna go around it with the brown. Okay. Then we're going to start placing in our leaves. So I'm going to start off with the oak leaves. So I'm going to grab some yellow ochre. And to do these, they're very simple. I'm going to start with one down here. I'm going to start by doing a little stem. And then I'm going to do kind of like this bump over top. And then I'm just going to kind of go in and out, and do these kind of like little lumps for our leaf. Then I'm just going to fill it in with our yellow. And then while it's still wet, take some green, tap it in so it kind of bleeds. I like to tap it where you kind of have those indents. I find on leaves, sometimes that's where they start to turn first. At the base, you can grab a little bit of brown if you want, green, orange, totally up to you, and you're just going to let it kind of bleed. I'm going to do another one. Let's do another little one kind of pointing down, just smaller. So our little bump at the top, and then kind of go in and out. Like that. And then again, grabbing our green, dropping it in there, maybe a bit more yellow. Like that, okay? There's 2 of those leaves. Now we're gonna place them around evenly around this side. So doing it again, I'm gonna go about halfway up and keep it close. You don't want it sticking straight out. You want it to kind of like make this V shape with the stem. Do our little boop at the top. Like that. Okay, you can go over the stem a little bit. It's okay if it doesn't cover. Grab some green again. Tap it in there. Like that. I'm going to just wet up my paints a bit more because they've started to dry. Okay, and we're just kind of letting it do its thing. Okay, and then I'm going to do another one up here because we want to kind of spray it around evenly. Spread it around evenly. Okay, so another leaf over here. Have that little loop at the top. Did another little one there. And then again, just adding our little bits of green and brown and letting them bleed. And then you're going to do the same thing to the other side, and you want it to kind of mirror. It doesn't have to be exactly the same because you want it to look quite natural as well, but you do want it to be balanced. So maybe even the little leaf can go on the inside here, but you just want the same leaves on each side to create that balance. Okay, so now that we're done our oak leaves, we can move on to other types of leaves. And let's do some simple, just some simple greenery. I'm going to create more of a green color. Got my blue, got my leaf green color here. Maybe a little bit of red just so it's not super bright. And I'm just going to start at the top here, and I'm just going to do a really light stem and then do our heavy pressure and light pressure. Light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure. And you can just do some simple leaves coming off of the stem like that. You can make them darker and lighter, just kind of switch them up. I'm going to do some coming on this side, pairing it with kind of like the oak leaf. Like that. And then on this side. Same thing on this side. And then down here as well, just balancing it out. Okay, now let's place in some of our berries. Now these berries are so much fun to do. First thing you're going to do is take some brown, Still working with our size 2 brush. And you're going to just do these little tiny stems like that, going down wherever you'd like to place your berries. Like that. Try and keep them similar on the same sides, or on both sides, just so they match well. I feel like maybe a little bit on here too. And then whatever spots we don't put berries in right now, we'll add more leaves to it later. Okay, so now for our berries, we're gonna grab a bunch of blue and a little bit of red to make this dusty, like dark blue color, which is beautiful. Now with this is fun. So you're gonna start with a very saturated color, so a lot of the dark blue on your brush, and you're going to do these tiny little dots. You can leave a little bit of white space in some of them just to have like a highlight if you like. Spread them out, okay? Then you're gonna wash off your brush, just dab it a little bit, take a little bit of that water off, and then you're gonna do some in between, just touching those darker ones, and the water from your brush will touch that darker pigment and create some lighter berries. So you have a really nice contrast of dark and light berries just from the pigment that's already on the paper. Okay, and you're just going to keep doing that on your stems. They don't have to be right at the tip of your stems. Like, you can kind of have them staggered down, like you'll see there, they're all staggered. And then I'm going to wash and dry off my brush, touch it a little bit. Not every berry needs a stem coming right off of it. Okay. But I love this pop of blue in this piece. This might be one of my favorite parts. Okay, so our darker blue. Spread them out. Wash off our brush. And then do some just touching it with a little bit of water. So it's a really nice light value. So you have that contrast. Like that. The last one on this side, and then you're going to continue to the other side. Okay, so now that we're done the berries, we still have these bare kind of areas. So now you can take whatever colors you like. You could use yellow, you could use orange, just red, whatever you want to do, and you can just create some more leaves in between these areas. And remember, have fun, like use different colors, have some, switch it up, use green, then orange, let the colors bleed into each other. Just fill in those kind of bare areas with some leaves. You can do longer leaves if you like. Like you could have ones that are like this. Whatever you want, have fun with it. Just try new things. Just fill it in until it feels nice and full for you. All right, and so once you've filled that up, now we can just do like a little bit of detail. So I'm going to take just a bit of brown and just on our oak leaves, I'm just going to do like a little vein. Just on the oak leaves, I think. If you want to do them on some of the green ones, you can do like little lines for veins. Totally up to you. I don't want to bombard it with too much detail, but I feel like the oak leaves need a little bit more. Like so. Okay, so now that that's done, we can move on to the detail on our mushrooms. Okay, so this is a fun part. Let's start with the shading underneath. Well, actually, let's do the little lines that are underneath those mushrooms. So I'm just gonna grab a little bit of blue just to make the dark brown. And I'm gonna do these lines from the outer corner, all pointing to where the stem would meet like the cap of the mushroom. See that? So they're all going to be kind of pointing towards the center from the edge. Like that. And then same with this one. Like so. Okay? And then for the shading on these, we're going to do some shading from wet or on dry. So instead of doing like the wet on wet, we're going to do some wet on dry, which is easy enough. So you're going to start by taking your darker brown and you're going to place it wherever you want to place your shadow. So I'm just going to place it under here. Then I'm going to wash off my brush, dry it a bit, and I'm just going to kind of blend. I'm just gently touching the edge of that and just blending it down. And it creates kind of like this soft blend. You'll see it a bit more with this one, just because this is a little bit of a shorter stump. So let's try up here. So we have this dark color, wash and dry off our brush, and then just touching the edge, kind of just blending it out, bringing that shadow down. Now, if you're bringing too much of the dark color down, you can wash off your brush, dry it again, and then just touch the edge of that and blend it down. But I want a little bit more coming down. Like that. I'm just going to blend it out. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing under this kind of like separation part. So just adding my dark color like that. Wash off my brush, dry it, and then touching the bottom of that, just kind of blending it out. And if you need to add more darkness, you can kind of just tap it in there. Blend it down if you want. Again, wash my brush, dry it, blend it down. And I'm kind of using like a dryish brush and when I blend down, and it gives a really cool texture. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? I'm gonna grab a bit more color and I'm gonna do this cutoff part. Wash my brush off, dry it, blend it down. Forgot this part too. There we go. Okay. And then even where the mushroom kind of hits the grass, you can just add a little bit of darkness here and then blend up. So wash off your brush, dry it a bit, blend it up. Okay, so if you need to, you can just tap a little bit more darkness behind the grass in that little area there. Okay, and then our last one, I need a little bit more dark brown color. Okay, like that. Wash it off, kind of blend it down. Again, if it's just pulling too much pigment, wash it off again, blend it down. Wash it off, tap, blend it down, like that. Wash it off, tap, blend it down. Okay, there we go. And then any other areas that like you feel needs a bit more darkness to it, you can always like just darken up your brown. Kind of just gonna make it a little bit deeper, our shadows here. Wash off my brush, blend it down. Using a bit of my dry brush to pull it to get that texture. There we go. Okay, so now we have that. Let's do a little bit of texture on the grass. I'm gonna grab a bit more blue, a bit more green, a bit more red. And I'm just gonna kind of just do some, now that our grass is dry, I'm just gonna have, you can even like break up your brush and have like a dry brush texture to it for your grass. It's totally up to you if you want that or not. You don't have to. I don't know if I love what I just did, but it's fine. Okay. And then lastly, the last part of this, outside of the stem on, or not the stem, the vein on this leaf. If there's anything you want to do on the acorn here, give it a little bit of texture, whatever you want, are the white dots on the mushrooms. Okay. So for this, you need to create a gray color. So I'm just going to mix like my blue and red that are here together. A little bit more on the blue side, maybe taking a little bit of like a yellowy. You'll get kind of like a really simple gray tone if you mix them all together. Okay, and what you're going to do is you're just going to add this little line of gray on the white part of each of these on the mushroom. Now, as we get over to where it's shaded, you're actually going to fill that whole white area with gray. Okay, you're going to make the whole thing gray because that would be a shadow. Okay, the ones up here is just the bottom. Make sure you're leaving some of that white. You're just doing a little part at the bottom. The one under the big one here, these are going to be all gray. Except maybe just like a few little white parts peeking out like that. Then you're going to make an even darker gray, so like a black. So let's grab some yellow, let's grab some red, and let's grab some blue. Lots of the pigment, and it will make a really dark color resembling black, maybe like a really dark gray. Okay, and then once you have that color, you're gonna go make sure your little spots are dry. You're gonna go underneath each one, underneath the white and the gray, and just do this little kind of shadow like that. Okay, just a tiny little shadow. Just make sure that those gray spots are dry just so it doesn't bleed into the black. like that. All right, like that. And then our little ladybug here, we can't forget this guy. I'm gonna do the head with this black color we created. Little legs, a little line down the back. Some dots. Like that. And then you can always add this to any, like, deepen any kind of shadows you want. Maybe little parts on the leaf, whatever you want to do. If you want to create any deeper shadows with this black color, you can, but that's essentially it. I think the only thing I might do is just grab a little bit of this brown and just kind of create a little bit of a shadow under here. Just like a slight darkness. Slight. So you can still see those lines, but it's not completely light underneath, you know? And that's about it. So there's our September watercolor project. I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. It's so much fun to do. Make sure to join our Facebook group if you haven't already. I will try again to put the link below. But it's just fun to see your work, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Okay, so now that our painting's done, I just want to show you how to quickly use this brush soap by Craftimo. So you're going to open it up, and you're going to take your brush, you're going to just rinse it with some clean water after you're done painting, and you're just going to start to gently move your bristles around the soap until it starts to lather, okay? And then you're going to take it, and you could either do it on like a, I don't know, maybe even a rag or something, but they said also your palm. And you're just going to work it through the brush soap, through your bristles like this. You can see some of that excess paint coming out that you didn't think was there. I thought this brush was like completely clean. Okay, really kind of get it all clean, and then you're going to go thoroughly rinse your brush and your palm, obviously. I'll be right back. Okay, so once you have rinsed it completely off, so make sure it's thoroughly rinsed, I like to just kind of roll it on my paper towel, like a clean area, just to take off any excess water, and then I'll just reshape the bristles with my fingertips to make sure it's a really nice point. And I will leave it on a paper towel flat to dry, or if you have some sort of contraption that you can suspend it upside down, that's the best. I don't typically do that. I tend to just leave it on a paper towel to dry. Find it works perfectly well. The only thing is, make sure that it's not resting against something like that and then drying, because your bristles will then dry with a curve to it if it's touching something. So make sure everything's out of the way, bristles are nice and pointed, and leave it there to dry. And that's about it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you so much for your support in purchasing these boxes. I really hope you're loving them as much as I loved creating them for you, and I'll see you guys next month. Bye.